Okay, you ready?
Whenever the isekai word pops into our mind, we usually think flashified, lots of power that we don't usually tend to understand until the very last of the story or the mid of this one. And as well, a male protagonist. With that being said, I'm gonna bring you guys a different kind of isekai. But how is this different, you may ask? Next Life as a Villainess is a story that follows Katarina Clares, a one who comes from a wealthy, mid-century noble family. At the very beginning of the story, we start off with a 10-year-old Katarina. We see a very selfish Katarina, a one that does not care about the well-being of her servants or any other classes that are not her family or herself. Right after this scene, we get introduced to Geraldo Stewart, which is apparently the fiancé of Katarina. However, Geraldo is portrayed as a very sweet kid, a one that is from a good family as well, but has a very different point of view of the life, not as Katarina. Later that day, Katarina decides to go for a walk and brings Geraldo with her. While walking with Geraldo, Katarina falls straight into a rock and hits her forehead, losing all consciousness for 5 minutes. It's in this precise time when she starts to remember her previous life, which was a life of an otaku high school girl who only had one friend and overly enjoyed otome games, especially
Fortune lover.
However, after realizing this, she starts to remember the names. Geraldo was the prince, and Katarina Clares was the actual villainess of this game. So after remembering her past, she starts to write down every single ending according to her memory. While compiling all this information, she discovers that there are actually only two possible endings. One will be she getting exiled for good, or she getting killed by the hand of Geraldo. And if you're wondering why there are only two options to go out here, remember that she's actually the villain of this story, so within the main plot, she does earn both of the punishments. Both in the anime and manga, Katarina has like a small group of Katarinas. The closest example of how this dynamic works would be the Inside Out movie from Disney, where every emotion gets like a smaller version of the person itself. After this huge epiphany, Katarina decides to go against the game and write down her own ending, which basically is very simple. She just wants to survive and live happy at some point. She doesn't even want to pursue love. Starting off the engines, we get two different action plans. One being the worst case scenario where she gets exiled. She will become a farmer for her to be able to survive all alone on the exile. While in the optimistic scenario, she gets to help everyone in the game. That, according to Katarina's logic, it wouldn't really give anyone reasons for her to be on trial. For us to understand how the second plan will develop, we need to understand some of these characters, especially the ones that are somewhat relevant for the ending that Katarina is trying to avoid. Just a very small pause here. In case you don't know what an otome game is, it's a dating simulator that revolves around different topics and where the main goal will be romanticizing one of the female or male characters. Now back to the video. Here we got the four main male characters. Their personality will actually change depending on how they interact with the main villains. In other words, Katarina's job is to fix those broken guys. The first one to arrive is Kate Clares. He was an illegitimate child from one of the heads of the Clares family. Being adopted by Katarina's fathers was a measure to avoid any type of drama within the family. On the original story, Kate is being treated as an outlier by Katarina and her mother, with the argument that Kate jeopardizes the status of the Clares family. Kate ends up isolating himself as a self-defense mechanism. Once Kate grows up, he ends up being a playboy that despises women, only until he meets the heroine and she makes him feel love for the first time on his life, which in this case will lead Katarina to be exiled or death anyways. Katarina decides to give her best to be the greatest sister to Kate. That way, Kate won't resent women and won't be either looking for love out of toxic traits. Katarina does her best to make feel Kate comfortable and part of the family, and everything was actually working well. Katarina remembers that Kate has a rare type of magic that allows him to build up things from the earth and make them move by will. Amazed by his talents, Katarina asks him to make a bigger doll for them to play. Kate doesn't feel comfortable doing this because he knows his magic is unstable, but he does it anyways for Katarina. For any given reason, Katarina decides that it's a very good idea to get closer to the golem and try to touch it. The golem hits her by accident and Katarina loses consciousness for half a day. Wakes up at the room with her parents that are terribly worried about her. Katarina's father explains to her that this is not the first time that Kate has hurt his siblings with his powers. She lets him know what in reality happened so he doesn't get a bad perception of Kate. After this, Katarina runs out towards Kate's room. Since due to the guilt he felt of hurting Katarina by mistake, he isolated himself, which was the first thing that Katarina wanted to avoid. Kate took the master key from the house and locked himself inside, so it will be very hard for them to break in the room. While everything is happening, we see Kate just standing at the door, listening to everyone behind. Out of desperation, she grabs an axe and starts smashing the door until it opens by itself. I love Frozen to death, but imagine Anna doing this to Elsa's room instead of only singing out loud. I don't know, the thought of it was very funny. Anyways, back to the video. Katarina apologizes for forcing Kate to use his powers even though he didn't want it to. Asks Katarina if after seeing his magic, she doesn't find him scary at all. Thing that she replies to saying that he only needs a little bit more of practice and that she is willing to stay by his side until he nails his magic. In exchange, she asks for Kate to never lock himself out again. Plus, if he ever feels sad or lonely, she will be always there for him. And this is how Katarina secured part of her happy ending. We are missing some of the guys yet. One of the things I appreciate about this manga is how the story is built between characters. Though I admit that at times it might feel a little bit rushed, it does provide good quality entertainment. It's funny, wholesome, and the characters are cute. With that being said, thank you so much if you made it this far. Let me know down in the comments who is your actual favorite one, and until next time, see ya!